Shalom, and welcome to another lesson in the series, The People of Israel, Striving for Leadership. Today, we will study Book of Judges, chapter 18, Sefer Shoftim, Perek Yud Chet. Chapter 18 continues the story we began in chapter 17, where in chapter 17, the emphasis was on the fact that the house of Micha was established a new house of worship. But here, we are continuing the story, whereas Micha establishes his new house of idol worshipping, which is the beginning of the process of the influence on the fact that there is no leadership. And chapter 18 announces that loud and clear. Bayamim hahem ein melech b'Yisrael. In those days, there was no king in Israel. And the verse continues, Uvayamim hahem, and in those days we have bayamim hahem and bayamim hahem, repeating that one has to do with the other. If in last week's chapter we spoke about the son stealing from his mother, we spoke about what's happening in terms of idol worshipping, here we have another step in the fact that there is no leadership. Shevet hadani mevakesh lo nachala. The tribe of Dan, seeking inheritance in which he can live. Ki lo nafla lo ad hayom hahu betoch shivtei Yisrael benachala. Until this very day, he still had no inheritance. This verse brings us back to the very beginning of the book of Judges, where we read in chapter 1 and 2 of the various different tribes inheriting their part of the land. And we saw that at first, the first tribes that are mentioned in chapter 1 and chapter 2, the tribes managed to take over their land, their part of the land. But some of the tribes, it says, Ephraim, for instance, in chapter 2, verse 29, Lo horish et Knaani hayoshev begezer. Ephraim did not banish the Canaanites who were living in Gezer. Zevulun did not banish the inhabitants of Kidron, it says in verse 30. Naphtali lo horish et yoshvei Beit Shemesh. The inhabitants of Beit Shemesh were not banished by Naphtali. But when it comes to tribe of Dan, here the story is not that they inherited, but the other Canaanites were still living there. Here it says, Vayilchatzu ha'emori et b'nei Dan hahara. The Amorite forces forced the descendants of Dan into the hills, for they would not let them come down to the valley. They didn't allow them to settle in their part of the land. So the tribe of Dan has not yet managed to settle. And here we are coming, I would say, to the main point of the entire book of Judges. The comparison between two tribes, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Dan. Where the tribe of Judah was supposed to be the leadership, and ever since chapter 1, we lost contact with them. They're barely mentioned. The only time the tribe of Judah manages to unite the people, where is that? That happens in the story of Samson, where we saw that in chapter 15, the people of Judah managed to call all the other tribes for what? To fight against the tribe of Dan. The leadership that we're so lacking, who pays, who is which tribe is suffering so badly for the lack of leadership, and that is Dan. And therefore the people of Dan are searching for another place to live. And this is, where do they go? They send 5 of their people to go search for another place to settle. On the way, they go through the house of Micha, and they take with them the Levite who is serving as a priest in the house of Micha. Something here is totally corrupt. The house of Micha, with this Levite who they turned into a priest, is now joining the people of Dan. And the people of Dan are looking for that leadership so much needed. And where is this Levite coming from? If we recall in chapter 17, this Levite that Micha took comes from Beit Lechem Yehudah, from the tribe of Judah. And here is where the tribe of Dan takes with them part of the tribe of Judah. Though he's a Levite, but he's a Levite who was located at first in the tribe of Judah. And if we recall from the very beginning, it's very interesting to see that already in the book of Genesis, when Jacob calls his children before him, he says, Judah will be a lion. I'm reading in the book of Genesis chapter 49, verse 8. Yehudah, ata yoducha achecha. Your brothers will concede you. But then in verse 9, Yehudah, you are a lion cub. Gur aryeh Yehudah. In this chapter, Dan is referred to Yehidan Nachash Alei Derech. Chapter 49, verse 17. Dan will be a serpent on the way. Dan will be like a snake. What does he do? Hanoshech ikvei sus. He bites the heel of the horse. When we take a snake and we take a horse, it's quite obvious that the horse is much stronger than the snake. But when the snake uses a strategy of surprising the horse, biting his heel, he then can cause a total anarchy. He can then cause a total tumult amongst the people, amongst the riders of the horse. And this is the way he can beat them. And who is this verse referring to? Of course, we saw Samson. He doesn't unite the people and establish an army. He attacks the Philistines where they're not expecting it. He will send the fox with their tails as fire lamps. He will surprise them in several different ways, but he will not take leadership. And therefore, the people of Israel don't go with him. But Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, gives Dan one other option. And what does he say to Dan? If we refer to it all the way at the end of Sefer Dvarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, we refer to the blessing that Moses blesses the tribes. He doesn't refer to Dan as a snake, but here we see in the end, in chapter 33 of the book of Deuteronomy, we see in verse 22, Ule Dan amar, Dan gur aryeh yezanek min habashan. Dan is a lion cub when he springs from the Bashan. Where is the Bashan? Northeast. When Dan does not manage to settle in the center of the land and serve the people as a snake, as one who will surprise the enemies, he then changes his mission and he goes up and he becomes a lion. And so interesting, we see where the people of Dan, when they go up and they find themselves in a new place, what do they call the name of the city? I'm reading in our chapter 18 of Book of Judges in verse 29. Vayikre'u Shem Ha'ir Dan B'Shem Avihem Asher Yulad LeYisrael Ve'ulam Laish Shem Ha'ir Larishona. They captured a city called Laish. In Hebrew, the word Laish means lion. The tribe of Dan can become a lion when they go up north and they reestablish themselves. And here they already don't have to be a snake, they can be a lion cub. They can be the leaders. Why? Because we see that Judah is not playing their role. And this, what we see, one other step in the lack of leadership in the book of Judges. Not only do we see idol worshiping, not only do we see stealing, lack of ethics, lack of any moral behavior, we see that the tribes are not managing to settle in their place. Judah did not establish leadership. We will see in the following 3 chapters where the tribe of Judah finally catches leadership, but in a very sad situation. And this we will read in the next 3 chapters, in the next story. But here in our story, the story of the tribe of Dan comes to an end where the center verse, the verse that begins our chapter, Bayamim hahem ein melech b'Yisrael. In those days, there is no king, there is no leadership. And this verse comes here again and again. In our chapter, Bayamim hahem ein melech b'Yisrael. There is no leadership. And what happens? The people lose the connection with Shiloh. They lose the connection with the house of God in Shiloh. And they search other options. And the people are not united. They're not united. And there is nobody showing the way. There is no guide to the path of the people. And therefore, we see how the verses of the book of Judges calling out and praying, we need leadership. Here we are getting close to the summary of the book of Judges, where the book of Judges comes out with one great conclusion. The people of Israel needs a leading king. Shalom.